speaking, we'd lose by an innings in the second test. If we'd been lucky enough to win the first test, that would at least mean that we had 4 live tests. But if we'd lost the first one, we'd then lose the third test, unless the British weather intervened. But then the fourth test was more interesting. The fourth and the fifth tests. What would happen in those? Who's heard of an English batsman called Mark Butcher? Yeah. So Mark Butcher is lauded in the UK for 172 not out against the Australians in the fourth test at the Oval. Now, why am I bringing that up? Well, we'd already lost the series. Now, if you think about that Australian team, the names of world-class, high-performing experts in their field in that team. The number of those guys who are, in their late 30s and they're still influencing the IPL. Yeah, that was, an exceptional test team for Australia. And yet, once they'd achieved their goal, they found it hard to sustain their performance. So a journeyman like Butcher could score 170 not out against Warne, McGrath, that bowling attack. But it was in a test match that didn't matter. Now, to me, if a team of the calibre of that Australian test team struggles with sustaining change, sustaining high performance, is it any surprise that we struggle with it in organisations every day? Now, moving away from cricket, if we look at the other side of this chart, there's some thoughts there about, why is it that we struggle with sustenance of change? Why is it we struggle with sustenance of high maturity? And I think the first point is actually quite often we struggle to be able to express the ongoing value for why you should continue to do it. So I was trying to think of examples that weren't sporting in nature around this, and actually sort of trying to talk a bit about business. And the example I came up here is with training. Yeah. So everybody can, it's quite easy to make the case to say, right, we need to train our staff in a new skill, X. So you run through and you train everybody in X. It's much more difficult to make a business case or explain the value of continued training or refresher training around X. The ongoing value and value proposition is actually quite hard to explain in some areas. So that's a factor in terms of sustenance. You achieve your goal, everybody has a big party, and then we go back to doing it the way we did it before. Second factor, how often a change initiative run as something separate, something different from the core of your business. The idea that you can have we're going to do this initiative, and then, hooray, that's over, right, back to work. Yeah. You put those two ideas together, and you get this idea, this skepticism of, okay, well, we did your initiative because you said that we needed to, because we needed to get that certification, because we needed to do X, Y, Z. But actually, I never really bought into it, and it's very costly, so we won't do it. So if you like, that's some thoughts around the type of business context that you can have for this sort of challenge around sustenance of a change initiative. So what does that do to a high maturity journey? Well, if you put that sort of curve onto sort of like the multi-year timeline, you actually end up with this sort of sawtooth type of pattern. So if you like, with this curve, what have you got? You have the big party when you've managed to be certified at a particular maturity level. And everyone says, yes, that's great. Then you go off and the board sells some new work, there's a bit of a merger and acquisition, the economy has a downturn, priorities change. There's the discussion about, well, I know we did that last year because we really needed to do this, but actually it was a really costly thing. Can we just save some money? Some of the projects that you're requesting to deliver measures and do your measurement, just don't bother. And actually the CEO says, well, he's a good guy, and I'm worried that he'll jump ship if I sort of have a go on him. So we'll just let him off this time. Yeah? All of which is just challenging you to sustain it. What happens to your quality teams that are actually charged with trying to sustain this? I mean, that's a tough job, because you're forever justifying your existence. Why should I do this? That's very, very demotivating for some specialists who can see the value but can't necessarily express it. So this sort of, yes, it's a continuous improvement journey, but actually, is it where we want to go? Is it how we want to be sustaining our high maturity, how we want to be exploiting the investment in it? I'd say no, it isn't, because the continuous improvement is from, if you like, below that line, whereas actually what we want to do is at the point where we've polished our high maturity, we've polished our implementation, is actually take it from there and really build and develop from there. And that, to me, is the business challenge around a high maturity sustenance program. It's not about continued certification. It's not about the ability every 3 years to demonstrate that you can do this. It's about taking what you've done within that and actually exploiting that to deliver real value to the bottom line. So I've talked a bit about just sustaining any change, but actually sustaining high maturity is a much more difficult thing than just sustaining a particular change. And why is that? Well, high maturity is complex. There's no two ways about it. It's very easy to spot somebody who doesn't understand high maturity. One of the reasons I gave you the caveat to say I'm a business person, not an expert in this stuff, is so that when I just say something incorrect or something that's patently ridiculous to those of you who know what you're talking about, you can forgive me because I'm just a businessman. But what is worrying is the number of people who you meet who think that because they can spell CMMI, they can talk about this, and it's just a certification. It just does so. There's a lot of ignorance and assertion in this field because it's so complex. It's difficult. Statistics has a lot of very difficult concepts in it. So I studied solid state physics at university, and the statistical analysis of solids, where you've got the many body problem because you can't solve it from first principles, is actually really, really complex. Very, very interesting, but very complex, and not everybody can understand it. Now, when I was putting this slide together, we put a plus sign in here to say, okay, sustenance of high maturity is difficult because you've got all of the challenges of sustaining a change, plus you've got a very complex thing. I actually think it's a multiplication, because the complexity, if you think back to those, what are the three factors that I pulled out as potentially making it very difficult to sustain a change? One of those is the ability to explain the long-term benefit to your business. So you've got a very, very complex, statistically based area involving regressions and correlations and coefficients and lots of the words starting with C. That was a joke. Thank you. But that does make it inherently difficult to explain to your business people, inherently difficult to explain how it adds dollars to the bottom line, which makes sustaining high maturity a real challenge and something that is worth focusing on. So, some of the principles that we've identified and used at Accenture for our sustenance program.